Hey friends, welcome to the Determined Truth Podcast, where we equip the church to be the church.
Well, hey everyone, welcome in. We are still in the pastorals, but we are doing a little bit of a shift in terms of topics. And one of the things that we have spoken a lot about over the last number of weeks is what should a church look like? We've explored different areas of the term we've used as ecclesiology, and that affects, church members and church leaders and that sort of thing. And we've dipped into this topic a little bit, but now we're actually going to dive into it, which is what happens when stuff goes bad. And this isn't going to be a full-on expose. And there's people who do a really good job of actually writing and discussing this stuff. We've had some of them on our show before. But at the heart of it, what happens when things are abusive? And I just want to start with a quote. I forget if this is a quote or a summarization of Scot McKnight stuff, but we'll have part of that on the screen. So if you're not watching on YouTube, go ahead and switch over to YouTube. But the way Scot McKnight summarizes church abuse, he says, abuse persists where culture protects power, loyalty, and image over truth and people. So the antidote is building what McKnight calls is a Tov culture, a good culture that practices empathy, grace, truth-telling, justice in time, shared power, humble service, and character-first pastoring. And I think that's a great place to start as we begin this conversation over the next few weeks. And I don't know, Rob, this becomes a kind of intimidating, intimate, scary topic. I know this brings stuff up for me. It will probably bring stuff up for you. What are your thoughts on diving into a topic like this?
I think it's extremely important for this day and age where many Christians are. Excuse me if my voice is a little scratchy today. One of the things that we want to be careful about, I know Vinnie and I think we're on the same page, and so is our guest, that we love the church. The church is the body of Christ Jesus. So when we talk about the church, we're talking about the body of Christ Jesus. We are the image bearers of God. When they look at us, they're supposed to look at God. That's our role. It's our mission. It's our calling. And we love that. It's the institution of the church or elements within the church that becomes problematic and dangerous and painful. And we've all experienced that, of course, not while I was the lead pastor, but certainly in other situations. And no one in my congregation would have anything to add to this. But nonetheless, it's a tragic situation. I think that many people are in that they're so hurt by the church that they can't go back to church and they don't know what to do. And I know many people like that. And I know you do as well, Vinnie.
And we're gonna on the back half of this conversation today talk about that. What is church hurt? And I think that term is used a lot and oftentimes appropriately used, oftentimes misused and even minimized. I saw a pastor friend of mine post a video recently on Facebook, and it was of another pastor giving a conference basically saying, the church can't hurt you. There's no such thing as church hurt. The church is the bride of Christ. And you basically just get over it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so damaging to people who have legitimately been traumatized and abused by the church. And there's people who just get offended and they need to work through that stuff. But it was, I saw this, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. Like I'm trying to figure out how to respond to my friend who I adore. And this guy's a great pastor, but it's like, dude, that stuff like that is not good.
No. We'll look at Second Timothy. Well, we looked at Second Timothy last week.
Yeah.
In terms of Hymenaeus and Alexander have done me much harm. May the Lord. This is Paul said I was harmed by these guys in the church. This is just the essence of what I think is so key, and that is that the devil's effort is to bring deception into the church, to bring danger into the church. In other words, that's where the Antichrist resides, if we want to go that far as well. And therefore, we need to always be on our guard. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you've said before, you've made the comment like, hey, there's no perfect church. And if you find one, don't join it because you'll ruin it. Like I remember you've made that joke a few times. But we should strive for good churches.
Yeah.
Right. Like we should always strive for
Absolutely.
our churches to be good. Like it's not bad. And I've even in my own experiences where I've been in some unhealthy environments, sometimes the excuse is, oh, well, there's no perfect church. Like you bring something up and that now that becomes just a way to minimize your own issues. It's like, of course there's no perfect church, but why would we say that excuse? I mean, as a husband, I wouldn't, I can't go and screw around and cheat on my wife and then be like, hey, no one's perfect, and
Right.
no
It's,
marriage is perfect, so just deal with it. It's like that would be an unacceptable excuse to use. Like, we can't do that. We should demand goodness, though.
yeah, it's like that old bumper sticker I remember when I was a kid that used to, I'm not Christians aren't perfect, or I'm not perfect, just forgiven. It's like,
Yeah.
well, that's true, but it often seems like a justification for not being perfect. And the essence of the scriptures are to strive for perfection.
Hmm.
Colossians 1:28 and 29, until I present everyone perfect. And the Greek is telos.
Yeah.
We've attained the goal. That's the goal. What we're striving towards. So to use that as justification. And then the thing to remember, Vinny, also, I know we want to get to our guest here soon, is
Do
that,
we?
it, well, that's true. We're doing so well all by ourselves.
We're kind
What
of
the heck?
crushing this thing
Hey,
right
we'll
now,
come
Rob.
back
Yeah.
next week if
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah.
All right. Is that the church becomes the public face of the church. Oh, it's the local institution becomes the public face of the people of God.
Yeah.
And so you're representing Christ and his kingdom, and you see throughout the Old Testament prophets, you've defiled my name. You've
Mhm.
defiled my name. It's God whom we are making known. When they'll know you are Christians they'll know you are my disciples if you love one another.
Mm.
So, in other words, the way we act manifests our God, our King, our Lord, our Christ. Uh, by this, you'll become sons of God, as the Gospels will say. This is how we manifest our King and our Lord. So, yeah, there's no excuse for it. Sure, it's true, but and we have to be careful about that. But that doesn't justify or allow it there. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we're bringing on a guest today, someone who has a little more formal training and experience, and some more years in this endeavor than us. Many years, actually.
Sure.
Not
Sure. All
just
right.
professionally, but just many years on
Yeah,
us.
and let me introduce him this way. Okay, look, I've been in ministry for 37 years. I'm not 60 yet, almost. I've worked in academics, universities, colleges, as well as pastoral ministry across a number of different churches. And I've had the privilege of mentoring numerous pastoral leaders, and just as importantly, kind of being mentored by others. And over the decades, I've met a lot of really gifted people. But our guest today, the idea was to bring on a guest today that just stands out as one of the finest leaders I've ever known. We wanted to bring in someone that was compassionate, kind, exceptionally knowledgeable, a dynamic leader that's kind of full of wisdom and integrity, one who served the church faithfully in local churches across the United States, and even spent a number of years working kind of like behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War.
So Francis
Someone who's
Chan, thanks for being on the show with us.
Yeah,
Oh,
come on, Vinny, come on.
sorry,
Someone who's a
sorry.
devoted husband, a loving father, and a trusted colleague, and just kind of a steady presence in difficult times. Unfortunately, that person wasn't available. So today we're here to bring on Danny Hall.
There you go.
There you go.
Yes.
Oh,
I
yes.
can't believe you guys didn't trust me that I was going to be honest here.
No.
Welcome, Danny.
Hey, it's good to be here. It's nice for you guys to have an adult in the room for finally. So,
And that's actually the truth, because we'll do so Danny's
Yeah.
part of our Determined Truth team. So
Yeah.
we'll be having a board meeting or some kind of planning meeting. And that really is, it's Danny is the adult wrangling in the middle school kids.
Every staff meeting.
Yes.
Okay, I'm the adult in the room. It's like,
Yes.
hey.
Yeah.
You know
There
what,
we go.
Danny?
It's not
We are
enough.
proud of that, by the way.
I know.
Okay.
I'm.
Yeah.
Hey, I love
Hey,
working.
Danny, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, just in case not everybody knows kind of your story.
Well, I grew up in the deep South and in the Baptist churches. Came to Christ as a teenager, even though I'd been a church kid. Got launched into ministry pretty quickly. Ended up feeling that God was leading me into full-time ministry. Went to a Bible college, met my wife there. We've been married for 51 years now.
Congratulations.
Just past 51 years. The path led us. I was in the Baptist world for a while till I got recruited. My first church I pastored was a little Baptist church in rural Mississippi, which was a great learning place for a young guy. God called us to go, as you mentioned, to Europe, where we were part of a team that worked with church leaders behind the Iron Curtain back in the Cold War era. I ended up living in Vienna, Austria for almost 14 years, where I worked behind the Iron Curtain, supporting churches and pastors and training leaders, and then also served as a pastor of an international church for 8 years there in Vienna, Austria. Came back to the States after that and pastored in several churches in California, in Tennessee, and back in California. So I've been in the ministry for over 50 years now. It's been quite a ride. And I think the thing that has been most helpful for me in this journey is I've been able to see the church and church leadership in so many different places and so many different cultures. And there are things that are certainly different culture to culture, but there are also some things, both good and bad, that are consistent across cultures. And what we're talking about today is, I think there's some elements of that fall into this. And I have some thoughts about why that's true. But I think that's this whole idea of what can go wrong and the rise of abuse and dysfunction in churches. It's because, pastors are human, and we bring into this our own frailty and brokenness. And sometimes that gets attended to well, and so other times it does not. And so it manifests itself. But I've seen it across so many different cultures. So I think that's the thing that both encourages me and saddens me to see these consistent things in the church, across culture.
Yeah. Let's start here when we talk about that, because so much of the health of a church does depend on the leadership of the church. Not always. You could have a healthy leader, and that leader could be in a toxic environment that's already existing. And then so you have the tough job of that pastor trying to right the ship. But oftentimes the community will reflect the leadership. And so one thing I want to ask you guys as kind of an icebreaker is, in our modern American context, if we were to maybe just go out and ask the average Christian, or just even look around at what we see, what has the average American church made the de facto criteria for what a pastor is or should be? Like, we say, hey, this is what a pastor should have, the traits or whatever. This is what it should be. What are some of the things that we might see on a popular level, at least?
I think that somewhat depends on the size of the church, particularly as in growing churches or churches that are already large or aspiring to be large. At the top of the list, I think, is going to be this sense of dynamic leader, speaker. The public face of the ministry has to be strong, captivating, have some sense of direction to it. So there's this combination of skills. I think the sort of the visionary leader and communicator is a big part of what most people are attracted to when they are locked into this model of growth. Is the numerical growth is the number one sign of health. And I think that's a lot of that in our culture.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Both you guys are baby boomers, right?
Yes.
No, I'm not.
Are you? You're a old Gen Xer, I guess.
66.
Okay, so it's fun. So Rob and you and I are both Gen Xers, but I'm on the borderline of a millennial, where you're probably more closer to being a boomer. So it's interesting how the generations transcend.
Oh, yes.
But my question would be to both you guys, though, is how much of that visionary idea of a leader is represented in baby boomer type ideology with a CEO model of who runs
100%. It's pervasive. There's no doubt that it rose, particularly in the 80s and 90s is when this thing really skyrocketed. And I 100% agree with you. I think that boomer culture in general had a sort of that kind of a success model in broader culture, as well as in the church culture. And I think what we did is, our generation did, is we begin to emulate things in the broader culture that were deemed quote unquote successful. And of course, you got celebrity culture built into that, all kinds of things that were driving that. And so the church, the 80s and 90s were the time of explosive growth, and it was primarily led, yes, by boomer generational people that were and I own that completely. I was for a long time, I was in that mindset myself. It took a lot to get me out of it.
Yeah.
Rob, you had some thoughts you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the question itself, actually, there's a lot of different answers to it, because there are so many different churches. So if mainline churches, established churches, older churches, when we say mainline, we mean certain denominations, but even other denominational type entities are more, what's the word I want, where you kind of have a process is the word I want. You have this process in place that has leaders within the denomination, perhaps helping contribute to the conversation as to what the church is looking for. But when you're looking at non-denominational churches and startup churches, and that's when you get oh, we need to grow,
Hmm.
and I think the idea of our goal is to grow large. I think that is not biblical, by the way. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just if that's your goal, I think that's a problem there. We need to be feeding the people of God, and if growth happens,
Hmm.
growth happens. Danny, you want to
Yeah.
comment?
And I think that once the non-denominational, the whole Bible church movement that started in the 70s early and grew, then exploded in the 80s, the whole non-denominational phenomena, um, the growth was so explosive that I also think there was a temptation in the denominational churches then to emulate those same things in order to compete, to be honest.
Right.
And that, so it became one drove the other, I think, a little bit in that. So it's, I mean, all churches adapt to churches are planted within cultures and times.
Yeah.
And so there's no way that every church in every culture and every time fights with how do I let the church be prophetic in that culture versus
Exactly.
how much do I use the tools of that culture to connect with and communicate the gospel to the people around me. So it's a tension that is real and a tension. And so the problem is when the success model got so big, that the growth success model, it tended them sort of dominate the way that we approached leadership or the way we approached church growth. And it sort of overwhelmed so many other things and led to a lot of the dysfunctions that we are seeing now.
Can I ask a two-part question, Danny, if that's
Yeah.
okay? Do you think that the church growth model, the idea of growing, caused pastors and churches to lose sight of what the pastor was really called to do? And I'll leave that open-ended. And then secondly, if that's true, what are some of the negative consequences that maybe we begin to see, at least in some situations, as a result of that?
Um, I think the growth models were all born out of a genuine value for people who don't know Christ to be reached with the gospel of Christ.
Sure.
Let's just say, for the sake of this discussion, that we grant that the origins of that idea were noble.
Sure.
What happens then is you apply it. The model then begins. You start to evaluate its success based on conversion rates, numbers, those kinds of things, because that's what you've set up. Behind this is this: I want to reach as many people as I can. And so it's very interesting to see how subtly it shifts in that. One of the things, if I can take just a small digression here, that I've noticed in churches around the world, if the three of us were to go to somewhere where the gospel's never been heard, and we go plant a church and we start from fresh, we go into a new culture, we learn the culture, language, whatever, we start to share Christ, we start to live our faith out, and people start coming to Christ. One of the first things we do is, how do we live for Christ in this culture? And it's all motivated by a passion for following Jesus.
Yeah, good.
So our eyes are on Jesus. What does this mean for us to live for him? What happens is the idea then of how we should live starts to get codified. And we start to develop, in every culture I've seen this around the world, you start to develop a profile of within that culture of what a good Christian looks like. And at some point, generationally, as this passed down, you start to shift your focus away from pure devotion to Jesus. And what does that mean? To how am I conforming to the model we've created of what a good Christian is? And I've seen it over and over again. And when that happens, then so much of our strategic thinking, and even the way people experience it, it becomes around, how am I conforming to this idea of what a good Christian is? And same thing I think happens in this church growth thing. It starts out with this: we're going to reach as many people for Christ, and then we develop these strategies. And so the focus then becomes on the strategies, and then we want to emulate. So we codify those strategies, and we start to write books and have conferences, because and everyone starts to copy that, and all of a sudden these metrics come into play, and the original idea starts to get subsumed underneath this new created portrait of what a good church, of what a growing church is, and those kind of things. So those are the kinds of things where I think the dangers come, the subtle dangers in all of this come.
That's good. That's good. With this we've explored kind of surveyed a little bit. We're not going too deep on the subject, but the church growth model and what's attracting leaders in that way. You can also have, especially in, like you mentioned, like Bible church type environments, where sometimes those environments aren't going for the flashiest person. They want to go for the deepest theologian.
Exactly.
It's all about being theologically sound. It's all about who has the, we wouldn't judge the person by the commentaries, but that's basically what we want. As someone who comes from the Reformed world, this is oftentimes my tribe and what they want. They want the smartest person who can memorize the most amount of church history and confessional statements, and argues, and preaches using all the deep theological terms of Calvin and whatnot. That kind of becomes one of the things as well, where we don't pay attention to the character of the man or the person, and we just say, hey, it's how theologically sound are they, and how well can they articulate that.
When we say how big is your library?
Yes.
So
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, that is it's like we judge people by how many books they have.
Okay.
And also then within the church, then the criteria for this, what is a good church looks like, is conformity to a set doctrinal plate. So we create a palette of doctrine that this is orthodoxy, and so that then becomes the focus. And one of the things that I've become more passionate about as I've gotten older, we get a little bit later if we talk about the health of a leader, is it's so easy to replace the passionate love for Christ with other good things, whether it's a doctrinal soundness, whether it's growth numbers. We create these ideas that ought to be fruit of a relationship with Christ and elevate them to that which is the criteria that we judge everything else by. And I think that's where we run into trouble, because conformity to whatever image we create is, and I'm going to be careful how I say this, but it's a form of idolatry. That we elevate certain criteria above the centrality of Christ. Now we coach it, and we can paint, we can color that with all kinds of fancy things to get around that. But in the heart of it, sometimes doctrinal conformity becomes more important than devotion to Christ. Church growth becomes more important than devotion. Whatever. It's just so easy. I mean, I find in my own life day to day with the same thing. You justify all kinds of things because you've created this idea. We build these constructs around ourselves, and we haven't gotten too much into the psychology of the leader yet. But I think it easily feeds, the psychology of leaders feeds into this. Which one of these little lanes you find yourself in usually is appealing to some aspect of your own psychology and your own needs to be seen as. Anyway.
Yeah. Wow. No, amen.
At Determined Truth, we do more than just this podcast. One of our major projects is training pastors in India each week. We even help start a Bible college there. But we could only do this because of the generous support from partners like you. Seriously, that means you. If you consider supporting us with a fully tax-deductible donation with anything from $5 a month or more, we can continue to equip the church to be the church. To give, go to determinedtruth.com and click on the Give tab, or find the link in today's show notes. Thanks.
So let's do this. Let's go through, rather than saying, okay, what are some of the things that churches often look for in a pastor? A few weeks ago, Rob and I, we went through 1 Timothy 3, and we looked at many of the qualifications that are there. I went and I pulled together a list of not just 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1, but then also some other places. We'll just go through and read some of these. We might not spend a lot of time on it. But what's crazy is what we want to notice is how overwhelmingly, when qualifications are given for pastors, the overwhelming majority that's given is on their character. It's not on their libraries and theological aptitude and acumen and those sorts of things. It's on who they are as people. And let's actually start with this. We use the word pastor all the time. Rob, as the biblical scholar, can you just give us, because I don't think we actually did this when we talked through the difference between how pastor, overseer, elder, those are different Greek words, but we identify them as the same. Pastor is the term that's used more often. What does pastor actually mean? Like, what is the meaning of that word?
Well, I don't have a particular theological answer for you, right? I mean, the word pastor itself comes from the Greek meaning a shepherd, which we tend to think of like in an Old Testament context. Oh, that's a put down because the shepherds smelt like the sheep and like the animals, and it's all bad. but it's actually used as the leader of Israel in the book of Ezekiel, for example, and elsewhere. So it's one who leads and one who especially when you think of the sheep and the flock as the people of God, one who leads and nurtures a flock, a group. Whereas
Yeah.
overseer and those are more technical offices.
Yeah. And Danny, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to throw in on that as well.
I think there's been a marked change in theological education in the last decade, maybe two. But when I came through, there was almost no emphasis on character and theological training.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was assumed, but there was not, like now that, seminaries have spiritual formation divisions and class. There are other things that are there where the big emphasis on theological knowledge, learning.
Yeah.
It was skill development and gift development and sometimes some little church management stuff thrown in there. But in terms of coursework, in terms of focus, I would argue that there was not very much emphasis on character issues. It was almost like an underlying assumption, but not really attended to. And so I think I don't know, Rob, what your experience was, because I'm old. I mean, I would have come through the pipeline earlier than you did, but it seemed like that the emphasis was always on the academics and the practical ministry skill stuff, much more so than on like I had classes in seminary on exegesis, the languages, theological classes. I had classes on preaching, a little bit on church management. But at the end of the day, I never had a focused emphasis on my own spiritual development. It was just sort of assumed in the background.
Yeah. Now that you bring that up, Danny, I remember so I didn't go through the seminary route in order to be trained as a pastoral leadership. I went through the route of academics,
Right.
and then found myself in seminary as a dean and all that. And one of the conversations I had was, we have a danger of, if you take all these classes and get a good enough grade, thereby we stamp you as approved for ministry. It's like, no, you might not even be qualified or called to ministry.
Exactly.
Just because you took these classes and passed them doesn't mean. And so that was one of the processes that we were having at the administration level, saying, how do we make sure that these men and women are called to this before we just go ahead and sanction them? Because if the academy rubber stamps them and says you now have an MDiv degree, therefore you're now qualified for ministry, it's like, no, you might not even be called. So that was something that we dealt with administratively and tried to bring that down to the students. Like, just because you're doing this doesn't mean that you are someone that should be in ministry as a pastor.
Yeah, and I think you fast forward to the current situation where, particularly non-denominational work, where there's no even denominational or ordination structure that does any vetting on that. So a number of people in the pipeline that get into church leadership without any serious vetting is alarmingly high at this point. But I think that there's been a recognition in the last 15, 20 years that this was important. And there were some place that I think they had to have all the crashes and burns and say, oh, wait a minute, there's something not right here. There's a lot of unhealthiness here. Maybe we need to give attention to this. But I think across the board, it's still an area that's underrepresented in terms of preparation for leadership.
That's, when you say that, Dean, that's really powerful. I think we need to acknowledge and validate the listeners who said, well, your crashes and burns affected me, affected my family, not your being anyone on the panel, but the crashes and burns of the institutional church, how many people that has affected, and how much that pains, I think, all of us, and how much we're trying to say, what can we do to help bring some healing to some of that?
Yeah. One of the phrases I often use, I've said it to the congregation at large, but certainly to leaders, is you can argue that it's a foolish thing for people to do, but the normal thing for people to do is, if they know you're a Christian or they know you're a pastor, they start watching you and they make decisions about God based on what they see.
Yeah.
And that's an extremely important thing for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, good
and
point.
and it's like, I don't think we take that seriously enough, that people are watching me and they're making decisions about God based on what they see. They're making decisions about who Jesus is. Now, you can argue that that's foolish on their part,
Yeah, no.
but the reality is that's what people do.
Mm.
And I'm not,
And so,
yeah, I would add to that, Dan, just, I always look at things through the lens of revelation and kind of that understanding ecclesiology in light of the kingdom. And it's like the devil knows that. And that's his goal. I know it's when we talk about deception and the role of the devil bringing deception into the church, it's so that he can affect either our ability to witness, our ability to represent Christ, and hamper us, and also to hamper those who are following and hinder their walk of Christ or their ability even to come to Christ. So there are people listening right now that have been deeply hurt by that.
yes.
And we need to acknowledge that and say, hey, we get it, but understand this can be the work of the devil sometimes too. And how can we, I don't know what an answer, and maybe I open up a can of worms without giving an answer to it, but how can we encourage them? Maybe how would you respond to that, Dan? How can we encourage them that there is a God of love who transcends all this, who desires to bring them hope?
Yeah. It's a hard one to know exactly how you
Yeah.
overcome that. I think it begin, when I think about, when I talk to younger pastors often about things they should develop, I usually point to three things that I think are so essential for pastoral leadership. And the number one at the top of the list is humility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we can demonstrate true vulnerability, humility, repentance. And while we cannot repent for other people's transactions, we can lament
Yeah.
and
Good, yeah, good word.
genuinely lament and
Right.
and repent of the sins of the church or the church that we recognize are harmful. We can hear people and take their hurt honestly.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think we can begin to show empathy, listening, true humility on our part, vulnerability, even being able to own those times when we've been ourselves guilty of some of these things. I have one instance in my past, it's over 20 years ago, where I firmly believe I participated in a situation that was spiritually abusive to another person.
Mm.
It haunts
Wow.
me to this day.
Mm.
Now, I apologize to that person, but it's a
Wow.
vivid reminder to me of how vulnerable people in the presence of people of spiritual authority can be deeply wounded by the way we handle those situations. So I
Yeah.
think humility, vulnerability, lament is a starting point so that people know that they're being heard
Yeah.
and that we take seriously this. I think that's a huge first step. And then again, from that point on, Rob, I think it's almost going to be individual depending on, we have to, each individual case then would have to be explored as to what steps are possible and where there might be true reconciliation, an avenue toward that or whatever. But I believe it begins with an honest lament, repentant attitude and ownership of the sins, if you will, of leadership in the church. That's got to be a starting point with that, I think.
So let's look at this. I'm just going to read through this list real quick of saying, okay, what are all the ways that a pastor, this is the job description of a pastor in terms of like the qualifications that they ought to have. So there's things like sacrificial love. Like Jesus talks about this in John 10, like the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep.
Vinnie,
In
you
Luke
want
15,
to include the actual citation that you have here in your notes in case people want to make this list and look at them later. Thank you.
What I'll actually do is I'll include this entire list
Okay.
in the show notes. So you can go back and you can just look at this list of 20 things in the show notes.
Okay, excellent.
So we see in Luke 15 how the good shepherd goes and seeks the lost. They are gentle guides. They are gentle and not quarrelsome, meaning they're peacemakers. They're not a bully. They're not quick-tempered. They're faithful to their spouses. They're faithful stewards. So they take responsibility and they recognize that a steward doesn't own something. Jesus is the owner. So they're stewarding someone else's property. They are humble. They're not arrogant, which means they admit when they're wrong and they assume responsibility. And so they try to restore relationships. They must be gentle, so they can't be quick-tempered. They must be sober. So it's not, it's not limiting this just to alcohol, but not have addictive behaviors. They must be peaceful. They can't be violent people. And that means in word or in action. They must have financial integrity. And they're not greedy for gain. They must be hospitable people. They must be a lover of good, not just doing good, but a lover of wanting to do good. They genuinely love that. They must be self-controlled in all their life. They must be upright, so have integrity in relationships and how they treat others. They must be holy, and so they have a devoted, wholehearted life to Jesus externally and internally. Now here comes the technical skill, are able to teach sound doctrine. Okay, so they're able to teach and they know sound doctrine. So there's that theology aspect. Let's go back to other stuff. They are respectable. They are an example to their flock. That list of 20 things that I just read, which are all directly lifted from scripture, and we could probably pull more things. The overwhelming majority of these are all talking about the character of the person. There is an ability that the person must have. So you can't just say, oh, this is a really good guy, he should be a pastor. But are there other things that you two would add to this list of saying like, hey, here's some qualifications that, we would say that the pastor ought to have these sorts of things from a character or technical standpoint?
I wouldn't add anything to the list. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I can't think of anything specific. I do think the emphasis that we're making here is extremely important. It's character over everything else. And it's hard to read through these qualifications and not go, oh, what mattered was what kind of people these leaders were, not how charismatically skilled they were.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably some pragmatic things that we could put in there. Like say it's the average church in America is going to be under 100 people and they'll have one pastor. So there's some pragmatic things that church might say, that hiring board that might say, hey, this is the person who's in charge of the payroll or the bills. So we need this person to be administratively sound. And so they
being a good administrator might be a good one to put on there.
And that might be different than if say you're hiring a pastor and you're one of 5 people and this one pastor's job is only care for members. So it's like, okay, administratively that might not be as important. So there's certain things that we could that are practical that you may or may not remove. But like you said, Danny, it's like the character is the huge thing.
And I would add one, maybe it's a summary of all of it, but I have come to realize that one of the great qualities in this is to be self-aware. And how that fits in this list is, if part of maturing, one of the definitions I gave this to one of my younger staff guys once at a church. I said, one of the signs of your maturity will be when you begin to understand better how other people experience you.
Oh, that's gold.
And I think that's key. You're only going to get that with honest feedback and the kinds of relational, building around yourself, the kind of relationships where people can speak truth to you. But you have to become more and more self-aware. This is how other people are experiencing me. And that to me is one of the ways in which the character of a minister, of a leader, begins to sharpen and develop, is the more self-aware we are. And we can only it's an odd paradox. The only way we can become more self-aware is if we have feedback from trusted people around us who will speak truth to us. That helps develop our own self-awareness by seeing how other people see us and can speak truth to us.
And we have to be willing to receive that information as well, because a lot of people are not.
Yes.
And I have a question I want to ask you, Danny, on that. But let me just go back to finish this conversation first by saying maybe we could add compassionate. I don't know if that kind of fits under.
Yes.
But compassionate and empathetic, because so many people come to you as the pastor, as the leader, with deep wounds and deep hurt. And some people just don't know how to handle that. And they're expecting that when they're vulnerable to the pastor, that they're in a safe place. And sometimes they're not in a safe place. So I think compassion will be there. Yeah. And then adding on that as well, Ephesians says, be imitators of God. And then Paul goes, and thereby in 1 Corinthians, that Paul goes, therefore imitate me.
Mhm.
And what you're saying, Danny, here is that when we have this character that says, I'm reflecting Christ, now therefore reflect me, guess what? We're on the same journey.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask another question related to that, all that, Danny, and that is, there are people that are really good pastors and really qualified leaders, but
Hmm.
they did not have a stable upbringing. They had trauma, maybe in their family, whether it's divorced family,
Hmm.
an abusive parent. So they're actually not as healthy as somebody else that maybe had a stable family back. So when you say, be able to hear others, um, some people just don't have that personal
Mhm.
character to say, I'm not confident in myself and who I am. And so when I get feedback from others, that it hurts too much. So would you say that pastor, that leader, and what role, even generally, so that particular case, but even generally, is the role for pastors to be getting counsel, having a spiritual director, an advisor, someone they can go to so they can handle those situations better and better?
I'm 100% believer that leaders need that. When it's been probably the last 15 years, I've been on a deeper journey along that line, Rob. And
Okay, right.
my first deep experience of it was with the wonderful ministry in the Bay Area when I was still there. The soul care ministry there. I spent a year in that 9 months in that program where it was designed specifically to provide this kind of care and feedback for pastors and leaders in a
Mm,
cohort for a 9 month period with a spiritual director and with community and deep looking at some of these things. It revolutionized the way that I thought about my own personal care. And so I've since that time become myself certified as a spiritual director.
right.
I believe that leaders need people around them, counselors, and it depends on the nature of the person. Some people need just a spiritual, and if you want to take a moment to define, a spiritual director is not a counselor. A spiritual director is
Mhm.
someone that tries to help you discern how God is moving in your life and learn how to seek how to really walk with God daily. And so it's a person it's in that role. But what
And
part
this
of
is
what
something
we
you've had formal training in, right? In your
Yes,
you have a
yes. I've
certificate
had
in?
formal training for that. And
Okay.
one of the things you do in that training, though, is you begin to say, "Oh, wait a minute. This is a person who has a need for something different. Maybe they do need to see a counselor. They've got some of the stuff you're talking about, baggage in the past, that where it would help to have a trusted counselor to help them deal with some of that and sort of unpack those forces. And this is all aware. Everything we're saying now comes under this banner of self-awareness, where we begin to understand uh, the. Let me illustrate if I can take a moment here.
Yeah, yeah.
The Whenever we all react to the world around us, and so something happens, we hear something, see something, and we react to it. But our reactions are actually driven by our emotions. So I see something, my emotions kick in, I react to it. But this was a helpful piece. It's not original with me. It came from a different leadership uh, teacher that I've really, really respect. And he pointed out that there's another step that we don't often acknowledge. So something happens, our emotions kicked in, and we react. But between the happening and the emotions, here's the step that we need to pay attention to: is that when something happens, we tell ourselves a story about that.
Mm,
I'm at the
mm,
grocery store. I'm trying to buy something. I don't know for sure what my wife wants. I call her. She doesn't answer her phone. I start to tell myself a story about that. Is
yeah.
she
Yeah.
is she is she just ignoring me? How does she expect, or is she hurt? I tell myself a
Right.
story. My emotions kick up and I start to react. Now, these stories we tell ourselves are products of the culture around us and the brokenness within us.
Okay.
And so what happens with the need for this spirit, where we're going with this with the pastoral leader, is even within our leadership, we are constantly telling ourselves stories. And if we don't ever unpack the sources of our storytelling, we'll never fully understand why we're reacting the way we are and understand what's driving these things. So sometimes it's as simple as having a good trusted friend. Sometimes we need a counselor. Sometimes we need, there's different things, there are different avenues to get that. But the feedback that we get, that we as leaders need to help us unpack what's going on inside, in order that we can know then, why am I reacting this way? Why am I always this, why is this affecting me this way? There's this brokenness also magnified by the culture around. So there's cultural expectations through the external forces and internal forces that color the way we tell ourselves these stories. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but I've found this to be really helpful for me to stop and say, okay, why am I telling myself this story? What's driving this?
This is so helpful. And I know that this has been my own process over the last 7 years or so now, as I've been through therapy and working some stuff out, because I needed to figure out and develop the skills on how to be more self-aware, how to break down the defensiveness that I had built up as a defense mechanism to protect my own stuff, in order to hear those things. One of my questions to you would be is, how would you talk to the church person who is fearful of the therapeutic age that we live in? They've been told maybe the type of church that they go to is a church that's anti-therapy, anti-psychology, that sort of thing. And so there's the barrier there, and all they're being told is, you just need to read your Bible more. You just need to memorize Bible verses more. How would you encourage that person to maybe break through that, to say, hey, there's something else out there that you might need to develop in your own process?
My cynical side wants to say, how's that working out for you? I think it's hard. Those are the most difficult, some of the most difficult ones, Vinnie, because if you're in an ecosystem, a spiritual ecosystem that doesn't allow you to explore these things, then there's a certain amount of trap. I would probably want to just have a conversation with them as a friend and see if we can explore more. This is probably a whole rabbit hole we need to go down in a different episode, or you guys need to, and that is, when do you leave a church?
Yeah.
Right.
When do you get out of a system that's harmful? And the debris fields in some of these places are so big, so large, and it's unfortunate. So that I don't know that there's a specific path out. I think that if it depends on the nature of the relationship. Somebody, you can have a conversation with them and start to explore and encourage them. If their spiritual ecosystem restricts the resourcing that they can explore, it's a tough trap, and it may be the only way out is to get out. But that's a whole different subject that's full of all kinds of naughty. And I'm not telling everybody to abandon their churches, but there are times when you may have to say, this is not healthy for me to stay here.
Yeah. Very good. Hey, right now we're kind of in a spot where if we jump into another topic, it's going to take us a while, and we're in that tween section. Let's do this real quick, because I think we might have to have you back on to continue on more of the conversation. Question for you. So you have gone through formal training as a spiritual director. I know you've been involved in coming in and helping organizations out, develop stronger leadership structures and whatnot. And I think we actually want to tap into some of those conversations, maybe have some anonymous case studies that we could talk about as we sift through this as it relates to the church. You're available, though, to actually come in and be a consultant for people. How would people contact you if a church is looking to have someone come in and meet with their leadership? Or what are the things that you do and you offer?
It depends on the church. It depends on the situation. If it's an individual, I do offer spiritual direction. People can sign up for that. If there's anything good that came out of COVID, it allowed us to realize that we can actually have meaningful conversations over Zoom. So I have clients from all over the place, and so we can, if someone wants that kind of thing, they can approach me on that. But on the consultant side, the area that I've tried to work is what does a healthy leadership structure within a church look like? I just say out the gate, I'm happy to do that. There's principles of leadership dynamics, of learning how to build healthy teams that I can help with. But even in that can't happen. That can only happen when the person at the top of the tree wants it to happen.
Yep.
That you can't come in from the side and sort of subterfuge that by saying, let's do this over here, And these people that underneath the leader want to have a healthy culture. They want to bring that didn't work. You got to, if the person at the top of the food chain doesn't want this to happen, it won't happen. And
been there, done that. And I would say if you're listening to this and you're part of an organization that's having an issue and you just think, man, a group of us, we're just going to have this grassroots thing and we're going to fix it from the inside. No, you're not.
You're not. It's not going to. But if the person at the top is willing to be vulnerable and say, I want to get better, I want this to happen, then there are a lot of really great things. There are tools we can bring to bear on that kind of thing. You ask that in contact. You can. My email is Danny at dhallconsult.com. People can email me that way. I don't know if you want to stick that in the notes there.
We'll have it in the show notes.
Do you have a Determined Truth email?
Yes, I don't ever use it. That's one of my, and all this confusion that I'm going through in the transition, I haven't actually set up my Determined Truth email yet. So
we could do his his email there, and then also on the determinedtruth.com page, and we have all this linked in the show notes.
Yes,
there is under the about section, you actually see the bios of Rob, Danny, and myself, so you could contact Danny that way.
There.
Yeah.
So
just use the contact page at determinedtruth.com. That might come to me, but I'll forward it to Danny.
Sure. So great. Those are all the ways they can do that. And let me just, for my last thing to say, and then I'll wrap up. Is one of the things I keep reminding myself as a leader, and I did this as a pastor when I was full-time pastoring. I used to tell myself, there's 600 people. This was my last senior pastor role or lead pastor role. There are 600 adults that are going to show up on Sunday morning, and they're going to expect me to tell them something about God.
Mm.
If the day that doesn't shake me in my boots and put me on my knees, I need to quit.
Oh, wow.
And I have carried that with me for decades now, because it reminds me of the gravity of the responsibility. And so it's so easy to get about building my, brand, and nowadays building my brand and growing the church, whatever. But people are showing up for me to tell them something about God. And the presumption of that is so overwhelming that we need that keeps us in a place of humility and dependence on God to lead us in that. And that would be, I'd leave that with any of our leaders that might be listening. Remember that. Remember the incredible gravity of what we're called to do as pastors and leaders, and the care and the trust that people put into us. And that's why, as we know, that's why spiritual abuse is such deadly and destructive abuse, because people put that trust for that to us, and we're representing and speaking for God. All right.
And we haven't even really touched on this at all, like the spiritual abuse side of things, because we're going to get there in a future episode. So we'll have you back on that, Danny. One other thing that's coming up that we need to talk about is Rob and Danny, you guys are taking a vacation coming up.
Totally.
And by the time this episode launches, it's going to come up pretty quick. It might be within the next couple of weeks. But what do you guys have on the horizon coming up really soon in early March of 2026?
Well, let me note this, by the way, and that is, I kind of joked at the beginning of my introduction, but I actually meant that honestly. Danny is one of the finest leaders I've ever met, I've ever worked with. His integrity. Danny was a consultant when I was working in Northern California, in Bakersfield. We called him in. He was such a good friend, a good help. Danny and another friend we're having lunch with tomorrow, I think, Danny with Bill. They provide an outlet for me, just being in a difficult situation and whatever. I would go down there and play golf with them every 3 or 4 months. They were down in LA. I'm in Bakersfield. We kind of meet in the middle and play golf. And that was just a wonderful outlet for me to be with friends that I knew I could trust. I knew I could share with what was going on. They were just such a wonderful resource for me. I wouldn't be anywhere near. I wouldn't have been anywhere near the leader that I was if it wasn't for Danny in his leadership. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your friendship.
Well, it's been a joy, a privilege in this journey. It goes all the way back to 2009 or 10 in the Tri-Valley, but in those days, a long time.
That's
but
right.
and I think that's the joy of working with you guys. We're different. We come from different places, but we have the same passion. We have the passions, but I think that it's cliche to say the whole iron sharpens iron thing, but it's true. I mean, we bring these experiences and pathways that God has led us on, and we enrich each other's lives in that, and we grow from it. And we learn from each other. So it's a joy to be part of the team.
Yeah. Great.
And yes, Danny, we're going to India.
We're having what we're really doing is we're just so excited about having basically 38 hours of travel. That's what we're doing each way.
The finest travel you could ever dream of.
All right. So we're leaving on March 7th, I think it is.
Yeah.
Danny will be in Northern California. I'll be in Phoenix. I have a couple flights to get to Amsterdam. Do you have one flight or two flights to get to Amsterdam?
Just one.
Okay. I have two flights. I go through Toronto in the middle of March. Great. And then we'll meet up in Amsterdam, and then we're flying to Delhi. We get there at like 1:00 a.m., I think, on Monday the 9th. And then we'll get a few hours sleep. That's fine. But then we'll teach Monday and Tuesday in Delhi, doing pastoral conferences and leadership. We kind of made Wednesday like a travel day. So we have Wednesday morning with our leaders in Delhi, whatever that means. And then we travel Wednesday afternoon to Karunakar, which many of you know Karunakar. And obviously Marcus is the leader in Delhi. And we'll travel down to Pitagorala. We'll be there late afternoon. I think I'm not sure if we have something that night, Danny, or not. But then Thursday and Friday, we'll be in Pitagorala with our brother Karnakar doing leadership training. The Bible college that Vinnie and Danny and I are a part of will have a graduation ceremony, even though they're in the middle of their first year. He wants to have that. So, and we'll get the building. We'll go to the building, Danny. Danny, that's dedicated to both of us.
Yeah.
So,
Another story.
That's another story. So, Danny, you want to fill in anything about our trip?
We are working with with people in India weekly. We have we do monthly. We teach at the Bible Institute there, but we also weekly are involved in training pastors virtually with online classes, and we over 100 pastors and men and women leaders in the churches there that are in the networks of these two men. And now we're going to go and just have some face-to-face time with the ones that we teach regularly, plus they'll be inviting, of course, a broader audience in their area. So I think it's just a way for us to deepen our relationships, challenge some new leaders, perhaps grow what we're doing weekly in that regard. So it's just, God's opened some doors. We just want to invest in those people.
Amen.
So looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
And if you're looking,
use your prayers, certainly, by the way, all of you, for our travel and our health, but as well as our ability just to kind of be fresh and energized, so that we can be there for them and for their leaders and for their people, for their churches, for the families, as well as wisdom for what we do. And then if you want to provide any support, that'd be great. DeterminedTruth.com, to the give tab. You can give to Rob or Danny, and then send us a note if you want. Hey, I want this to go towards your India trip. That's great. Please do that as well.
Yeah, and we have links to there on the YouTube. You'll see it right now. It's determinedtruth.com/India. You could see our webpage that explains what we do in India and whatnot. And like I said, if you would like to give to help out, especially on a trips like this are expensive. And so that'd be a great partnership to have. And it's expensive to operate this throughout the year. So if you want to give throughout the year, that's helpful as well.
And one of the expenses, not only there's travel expenses for Rob and I, we also supplement and pay for many of these pastors to travel to the conferences and for their accommodations because they can't afford it. So we also underwrite the cost of the conference for these men and women to come.
Yeah. We work with poor leaders, not with poor leaders.
They're not
leaders
poor leaders.
Poor.
Yeah.
And they have almost no Bible training or background whatsoever. So having them come is wonderful for them, but they often can't afford the $50 for a train ticket to come to where we are. Yeah.
Well, guys, I hope you have safe travels. Don't drink the water. And I look forward to seeing you when you are back. Danny, thank you for being generous with your time and hanging out with us. Always love hanging out. And dude, it's been like an hour and I haven't even made a joke about how old you are. So are you proud of me for that?
Yeah, you guys are amazing. Hey.
Well, I didn't say it. You said it.
No, you did.
No, I said
you did. Listen to the recording.
It's a self-awareness thing then. I guess I still need to keep doing work on
like I said, adult in the room.
Hey, thanks for being here, Dad.
Yeah.
All right.
Gramps.
Take care, guys.
Love you, Gramps.
All right.
Hey, Danny, enjoy your nap.
Have a good day, kiddo.
Yeah. It's almost 10 o'clock, man. Go get some oatmeal and then hop in bed there, bud.
Hey, I'm still in Arizona, so it's almost 11. Yeah. All right, take care, guys.
All right, everyone. Hey, hope you enjoyed this. We're going to have more episodes on this type of topic. So today's kind of an intro into the world of what are we calling it when I forget. Now I'm stumbling on this.
Leaders go bad with Danny Hall.
With Danny Hall. No, but
you labeled it.
But it's called when something's not right. Because oftentimes it's like, man, something's not right. And it's easy to identify when something is not right, where it's like, oh, this is the thing that's not right. And it's very clear and objective. But that's not most of the time. I think 90% of the time, it's just like something seems off and I don't know what it is. And
Yeah,
oftentimes it's not knowing what it's supposed to be helps us identify what it's not. And that's kind of what we're looking at today. And so we'll come back and we'll look at more of these topics in the future. So for everyone else, hope you have a great week. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks for joining us today. If you dug it, please subscribe and share it with others. Check us out at determinedtruth.com to see more of what we do and maybe even consider supporting us. See you next time.
Faith is an